Greetings. I am Sifa Scholar here with you today, and I will be reading the newest episode of our book that we're translating to English, Lady of the Jungle. This is episode 4, I think, and we are continuing where we left off. If you haven't seen the other episodes or are confused on why everything is happening and how this came to be, I suggest you just go back, relax, grab something to eat or something to do, and watch everything. So we shall now begin. When they got in the car, Atife sighed in relief, and with a lump in her throat, she described her meeting with his grandmother. She added at the end, I put your position in danger. Arash laughed out loud and said, but I'm happy I have always wanted a woman like you who can resist their influence. And you proved tonight that I wasn't wrong about you. Atife, I'm not dependent on anything they have. From tonight on, we'll live for ourselves, and I'll try to build a prosperous life. I promise you this, and in return I expect you to help me and not be afraid of the hardships and problems they'll create for us. The grandmother's threats only led to them being disowned from the family, and the rumor that Arash had been disinherited from his father's wealth was believed by everyone until Arash's father died. However, when Arash's father died, sorry for a poor translation, he had left half of his wealth to Arash in his will. Atife was happy, but not because of the inheritance they had received, but because the influence of her grandmother and Fahimi had not caused Aryan Nejad, their elder, to give up on his only son, and he had done something against their wishes. Aryan Nejad the elder only saw Hediye twice while he was alive, and both times Atife and Arash were not present. The grandmother's nurse had taken Hediye with her and brought her back. In response to Atife's question to the nurse, who asked what the family's reaction was when they saw Hediye, the nurse frankly admitted that the grandmother believed that her granddaughter's eyes had the same audacity as yours, and she hoped that her tongue would not be as sharp as yours. But her grandfather believed that outspokenness could be a factor in Hediye's progress, and they couldn't understand why you didn't hire a nanny for Hediye and why wasn't she taking formula. Atife said, why should I give my child artificial milk when I'm able to feed Hediye myself? Isn't it true that according to most doctors, that kind of milk is the most complete food? This book is weird. But as for being a nanny, since I'm not working and I spend all day at home, I don't see the need for a nanny. But I'm glad they're interested in Hediye's life and upbringing. A few days later, a gift was sent from Arash's mother for the child. And Atife thought that the baby had a positive effect on Arash and his family. However, this soon turned out to be not the case, and until the death of Arash's father, relations remained strained. The death of two other members of Aryan Nejad, which occurred within less than 2 years, prompted Arash to get closer to Ferengis. He believed that the loss of his parents had taken a severe toll on Ferengis' spirits. However, Fahimi would not allow this closeness, and the brother and sister continued to live their lives apart. But after Fahimi's death, Atife was confident that she could improve relations between the brother and sister. And now we arrive at chapter 4. We aren't even 1/5 of the way. Great, amazing. Chapter 4. The sound of something falling woke Atife up. She opened her eyes and saw that her notebook had fallen to the ground. She picked it up and put it back where it belonged. She looked at the clock on the wall. It was past midnight. She said to herself, God will help us. I shouldn't be worried. She turned off the light and went to bed. Relatable. She woke up in the morning to the sound of Hediye. She saw her daughter dressed in full morning clothes. Morning, not morning. Sorry for my accent. Hediye said, Good morning, Mom. We're going to be late. Atefe felt tired from not sleeping well the night before, but she got out of bed and asked, Is your father ready? Not yet. Okay, I'll get ready while he gets ready. Anxiety and excitement were growing inside Atefe. She was worried that she would be mistreated by her husband's relatives yet again at a funeral. This time, with Hediye there, she couldn't bear the humiliation of the family. She regretted promising Ferengis that she would attend the funeral, but it was way too late now. When she got in the car next to her husband, Arash looked at her pale face and said, Atefe, are you okay? Why are you so pale? I'm fine, don't worry, I'm just a little excited. Hediye also seemed excited and couldn't wait to meet her aunt. Each of them were lost in their own thoughts. Nice family. Would be a shame if something were to happen to it. And this isn't a spoiler, but I legit don't know what happens. A breeze carrying the sweet smell of cocoa wafted into the car, drawing the attention of the passengers to the chocolate factory. Hediye asked, Father, does Fahimi have a share in this factory? Instead of answering, her father said, My daughter, I have tried to keep you away from all these appearances. Curiosity about other people's wealth will lead you to envy and then to questions that need logical answers. Unfortunately, getting to the root of the contradictions will not get you anywhere, but I can tell you one thing, and that is that people like Fahimi are part of a large group of investors who control all the wealth of this country. But instead of thinking about these things, you should think about how you will deal with this class and remember that not everything in this world is limited to wealth and status. I'd say some people disagree with that. Atefe said, It is clear that wealth creates a false happiness and takes valuable sacrifices from human beings, such as conscience, compassion, and love for others. Hediye said, Don't forget that my father is also an investor. Do you consider yourselves any different? I am not the only one who considers myself outside the gang. Farhad, Fahimi's eldest son, is also outside the gang. Though I haven't seen him in years, I know from afar that he hasn't gotten involved in this gang. Unlike his father, he hasn't gone after stock exchanges or buying factories. Maybe he and I can start a new system of investments so that the fruits of people's lives and efforts are not wasted. Futile struggle, doomed from the very start. Atefe shook her head in disbelief and said, This talk of yours will only remain at the level of talk because you know better than anyone that you and Farhad, if you can establish good relations with him and both have the same point of view, are in the minority and your hands are short. Maybe this idea of yours will come to fruition one day, but not any time soon. They passed through a very green boulevard. The villa was built in the middle of large gardens. The car stopped next to a very luxurious villa. The doorman opened the door for them to enter, and the Aryan Nejad's car stopped in the parking lot. The doorman, who was dressed in morning clothes, morning again, not morning, approached the car, opened the door, and they got out. The arrival of this family in the hall was announced by another person. For Hediye, stepping into such a place with such ceremonies was interesting and exciting. Among the guests who had come for the funeral, Hediye did not know anyone. They were all dressed in expensive black clothes, and Hediye saw a fake sadness in their faces. A closed coffin was placed in the middle of the hall, and a gold brocaded cloth was spread over it, and the guests were gathered around it. Among the guests, a dignified woman approached them in front of the curious eyes of others. She stood in front of Arash for a few moments and looked at him. Then she threw herself into Arash's arms and put her head on his shoulder while tears dampened her face. Arash hugged her tightly and whispered something in her ear that made the woman separate herself from him and take a step back. While wiping the tears from her cheeks, she could not take her eyes off her brother's face. Arash introduced his wife and daughter to her, and Ferengis embraced them warmly. The silence that reigned over the environment was broken by a murmur from the guests. Ferengis turned to the waiter standing next to the hall and said, "Bring coffee for the guests, and we'll be back while they finish drinking it." Then she put her arm in her brother's, and they both headed for the library. As Arash entered, he looked back. Atife nodded her head in approval. When the library door closed, Atife sat her child on a sofa. A waiter offered them coffee. Drinking the fragrant coffee relieved the fatigue of the road. A relatively young man approached them and said, "I am Farhad. My mother forgot to introduce me to you." Atife said, "When you approached us, I guessed from your resemblance to Mrs. Fahimi that you must be her son. This is my daughter, Hediye. Please, share our griefs." The hands that were clasped together for the first time shone a light of hope in Atife's heart, because this young man, unlike his father, had shaken her hand warmly and sincerely. Farhad said, "Although I should not be happy under these circumstances, I am grateful that you accepted our invitation." Then he smiled and turned to Hediye and continued, "Also, dear cousin, I am honored to meet you." Hediye bowed her head humbly and thanked him. With the arrival of another group of guests, Farhad excused himself and joined the newcomers. With the announcement that all the guests were present, Ferengis and Arash left the library. After a few minutes, with Ferengis' permission, the coffin was transferred to the ambulance, and the family each got into their cars. Arash wanted his wife and daughter to stay at the villa, but Atife, after convincing him, walked out next to him and followed Ferengis' car. After traveling some distance, Hediye felt weak. At the cemetery, Fahimi was buried in the family tomb next to his parents. After the funeral, the guests returned. Arya Najad breathed a sigh of relief and intended to return home. But Ferengis, who was next to Atife, said, "Surely none of you will be willing to leave me alone in this condition?" Atife nodded her head in agreement, and Ferengis continued, "So please don't leave me alone." Then she turned to her brother and said, "I have no one but you. Even though you don't love Fahimi, stay with me and supervise their work to make up for the years of separation. I haven't seen Hediye yet, but I want her to stay with me for a few days." Arash was hesitant and didn't know what decision to make. Should he take his daughter and wife's hand and return home, or should he give in to his sister's request after years of separation? Atife saved him from his dilemma and said, "Be sure that we will accompany you and will not leave you alone. It is better to move. The guests are waiting for you." Ferengis, this time accompanied by her brother and Farhad, left the cemetery. Upon returning, the guests had lunch at a very luxurious hotel, and some of them separated from the Fahimis. Hediye was asleep most of the way, and when she opened her eyes, she saw herself in the same green boulevard and was sure that there was not much distance left to the destination. When the car stopped in the parking lot, she was still asleep. The atmosphere of the hall was filled with the smell of various flowers. Hediye leaned on her father's shoulders to avoid falling to the ground. Arash guided his daughter to a room that one of the servants had put at their disposal for rest, of course, and said, "Rest completely. I will wake you for dinner." Then he joined the guests. Hediye entered a very beautiful room with a window facing the garden. The room's furniture was perfectly coordinated and organized, and beautiful, of course. She forgot about sleep for a few minutes and looked at the room. Then she went to the window and looked at the long row of silver cypress trees that were planted along the edge of the street. Sleepiness and repeated yawns made her take to bed. At dinner, Hediye had regained her strength and was eating with a full appetite. For a fleeting moment, her eyes fell on Farhad, who was playing with his food and kept looking at the clock every few minutes. Hediye wondered if Farhad was waiting for someone. The circular movement of the servants and the automatic services was interesting and fascinating to Hediye. She had seen the aristocratic hospitality in movies, in the European style, but it was still unbelievable for her that she was actually participating in such a ceremony, and what she saw was not a movie or a dream. The uniforms of the hosts and the bowing and greeting could have kept Hediye occupied for hours. When half of the guests left the villa, it was past midnight. The last group of guests left after being escorted by Farhad, because Farangis was upset and tired. She apologized to the guests and went to bed. She left her uncle and niece on the couch, and they both took a deep, long breath. Farhad asked, "Uncle, would you like a drink? If you order, I'll have them bring me a cup of tea." "Thank you, I would appreciate it." At Farhad's order, a cup of tea was brought for Arash. While he was sweetening his tea, he is not British, he asked Farhad, "My dear nephew, may I ask what you do for a living? You are certainly not a factory owner, because I did not see your name on the list of the factory owners." Farhad smiled and confirmed his uncle's words, saying, "That's right, uncle. As you said, I am not a factory owner. Although I have the title of the eldest son of the family, I have nothing to do with trade and capital. Contrary to my father's wishes, who wanted me to follow in his footsteps, I went in search of the soul and spent my time on the occult sciences. I am a specialist in metaphysics." Arya Najad looked at Farhad in disbelief and said, "Would it be possible for you to explain more about your profession?" Farhad, with a smile on his face, said, "Of course, I can look into your eyes and put you under my influence and make you obey my will, or I can put you into a magnetic sleep. That is a hypnotic sleep, for any of you wondering." Arash gathered himself a little and said, "If you have such power, then why did you allow anyone to impose his power on you in your living environment? I don't mean to offend anyone, But the way you say it, the power of another and his influence on your will was much stronger. Otherwise, how is it possible that someone with such extraordinary power can remain silent about the inhuman actions of others? Farhad said, I understand what you mean, uncle. But isn't the fact that I didn't follow my father's path and pursued my own goal a sign of my superior prowess? But as for why I didn't have use my power to influence the person you are referring to, and I know you mean my late father, I should point out that even a hypnotist is a human being and cannot control the whole society. Humans have the right to life. How do I know what I want to suggest to others is correct and flawless? And how long can one control the will of others? Humans have a standard for the way of life, and what you are asking me to do is to take away that way of life. And this... Maybe I couldn't express myself very well. If I'm not mistaken, I recently read an article that said that addiction can be cured through hypnosis, so that people become disgusted by the name of drugs. Don't you think that people like your late father were also addicted, and that something should be done to treat this class so that they become disgusted by the name of profit and capital and run away from it? Farhad put his hand on his uncle's shoulder and said, You know better than me that everything is temporary, even controlling the will of others. A person is under your control as long as he is asleep, under your influence. But when he opens his eyes, his will is no longer yours. He is capable of doing things that he wants to do, uncle. A psychoanalyst cannot be sure that he has cured his patient in one session. Only by repeating his meetings with the patient and preparing his mind during this period can he be hopeful. But not at once and not in one meeting. We must strive to improve the current situation and hope that one day this system will change, but not overnight and not alone. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go to bed. It is almost morning. Aryan Najat squeezed Fahad's hand. Well, folks, that is all for today. I really hope you enjoyed that. Sorry if my voice was a bit weak. It's like midnight when I'm recording this, but So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. Go watch my other stuff, like, subscribe, whatever people say when they're on YouTube and the like, and yeah, I'll see you later. I know I'm not a microwave, I just like doing that.